Welcome. This is my first foray into the YouTube universe. And obviously, I've created a channel which is going to be focused on crypto, finance, macroeconomics, areas that have been real passions of mine over the past several years. And I've gotten to a point where I've learned a lot of things the hard way and collected lots of information, processed lots of information, made lots of mistakes, had some successes, and I've gotten to a point where I wanted to start documenting the lessons that I've learned and am learning and share them in hopes to really just document my own personal journey through the space and investing, um, and to educate myself by preparing these videos, and hopefully you as well. Of course, nothing contained herein should be construed as financial advice. I am not a financial advisor. In fact, I have absolutely no formal financial background. Um, so let's get right into it. So technical analysis is one of the first areas that got me intrigued into finance in general, looking at YouTubers, seemingly predicting with the crystal ball what the price was going to do, some cases being spot on, other cases being dead wrong. Uh, Initially dismissed it as hocus pocus. Then, after the Black Swan events of March 2020, um, had a lot of time to myself in New York, hence the title of the channel, um, to really dig into it on my own. And after several years of going down the rabbit hole of TA, of finance, of crypto, um, of macroeconomics, uh, I've begun to formulate my own thesis in terms of how technical analysis could fit into my life. And so many people you'll see out there on YouTube in real life will say that technical analysis is a way that you can make money, right? It's a way that you can trade. You look at the price. If it went up, that's good. If it went down, that's bad. Um, Maybe, right? I think it's more sophisticated and nuanced than that. Pure technical analysts will say that everything is accounted for in the price. So this includes macro conditions, even black swan events, and that it's a sum total of the investor, of the psychology and emotional state of all market participants taken in aggregate. So that's nice, right? From an academic perspective, uh, that's very romantic. That's very intriguing, right? But how does that translate into practical use? And so classical charting and price patterns, as well as support and resistance and moving averages and things that we can get into on a topic by topic basis if there's interest. But really, when people say that everything is in the price, what we're really looking for is obviously trend. What is the primary trend? Is the trend up or down or sideways, trendless, as we're probably seeing now? Uh, and are there patterns that recur repeatedly over time, many, many decades, even centuries, and maybe even have uh, their grounding in nature and laws of nature and principles of nature that we can identify, recognize, and use to construct our trades, to construct our investment thesis, to identify opportune times to make larger purchases, and importantly, to estimate the downside risk. I think what gets a lot of people into a lot of trouble with their portfolios and therefore their lives is they'll go on YouTube, they'll find someone who is permanently bullish on the space, whether it's in crypto or otherwise, precious metals, Tesla, whatever it is, right? And they fail to give the downside case. A lot of that now is grounded on grounded in tightening liquidity conditions, tightening financial conditions, whatever, rate hikes, geopolitical things, balance sheet reductions, whatever is the flavor of the week. Uh, but technical analysis allows us to identify levels of support and resistance, um, important trend lines that either have held up or look like they're about to break down, a momentum, early warning signs of either a bottom for a potential bottom or top, or a potential reversal in trend. So those are some of the practical things that I've learned where technical analysis can be really helpful. And also, I think TA doesn't get a lot of attention in terms of its role as a fundamental in helping fundamental analysis. So if you're trying to compare a given asset to, let's say, a given benchmark, let's say Bitcoin in the crypto space as sort of that reserve asset against which all other assets are compared in terms of their relative strength, that in itself, to me, can save you a lot of time in terms of fundamental analysis and just telling you, in many cases, the chart really tells you the whole story. So let's get into some of the specifics. I'm going to just pick 4 charts today, really just a simple starting point. We're going to talk about Bitcoin, and so let's start with Bitcoin. So this is a monthly chart of Bitcoin against the United States dollar, and as you can see, we're making higher highs and we're making higher lows, right? Over, let's say, about 10-year time frame, 10-year plus time frame, we're making higher highs and higher lows. So the primary trend is up, the secular trend is up. Of course, when you've been in a sideways period for over a year and sentiment gets really depressed, it's easy to lose sight, of the big picture, which over the long term has been really bullish. And I want to just give a shout out to Bob Lucas, someone that I found, through various channels, someone providing really, really good information, and he has a 4-year journey YouTube channel just called Bob Lucas, where he goes over his 4-year cycle theory, and it's a really helpful framework to think of the long-term ebbs and flows in the Bitcoin cycle. So, so right now what I'm seeing is that we've been in a sideways period, and if we sort of drill down into the more shorter-term time frame, the weekly here, which is still more of a macro time frame, and again, trend lines and support levels and things, are sort of always subject to change, right? But one can imagine, this sort of rough trend line with a number of touches, 1, 2, 3, 4, and now testing the bottom of the range, and so there's a bit of a decision point here at the bottom, in terms of where price would go. It's natural to see some sort of a bounce at this level. The question is, how strong of a bounce is it going to be? Is it going to be the bottom, the macro bottom, and go up to all-time highs from here? Will it stay in this range, until so many people have just been chopped up into pieces and no longer solvent, right? Something like this, or is there going to be, some sort of a breakdown? And, the answer, is I don't know, right? So, that's one thing that I think people get really get into trouble is that they use technical analysis to justify whatever thesis they already have about which direction the market is going to go, and then they look for things that will support their thesis. I think that's really dangerous. Um, so yes, there's a potential that it could go up. There's a potential it could go sideways, and there's a potential it could go down. And people get annoyed at that and say, well, you could go up, down, or sideways. That's TA, right? Well yes. So what are you going to do, right? So that's sort of the question that I hope to shed some more light on here. But if we look, more at the shorter term time frame, so the daily here, we can see this sort of channel that's been building. And people kind of want to know now, how low could we go, right? If let's say this support holds, but then dead cat bounces, down to the downside, or if it just flushes through and breaks down, um, you know, we can sort of, uh, postulate that there's, a bit of a shorter term channel through here, and that, if we were to estimate a sort of measured move, should this break down, we get something along the lines of 25,000. I think this is in line with what some people have been estimating. Could it go lower? Sure. The previous all-time high was 20,000, right, from 2018. But it's good to have the downside potential in mind, and technical analysis sort of gives us an idea of that. It doesn't mean that it'll necessarily go there. Doesn't mean it'll find support there. Doesn't mean it'll even reach there, and doesn't mean it won't punch below it, right? So just kind of a summary of sort of where we are and how we got here. Now, Luna against Bitcoin, right? So if we compare the price of Luna in US dollar terms versus the price of Bitcoin in US dollar terms, and sort of give you that ratio between Luna to Bitcoin, this has been a very strong chart over the course of the cycle, and provides an example of how TA can show us what assets are stronger relative to a reserve asset like Bitcoin, right? But nothing can go up forever. So what do I mean by this? So on the weekly chart, we can see that this is a very bullish chart against Bitcoin. It's been making much higher highs and higher lows against Bitcoin. And we're sort of trading here at this support level of the previous highs, here in the early, late 2021, early 2022. And so the price is sort of testing that. One thing that technical analysis is helpful at is giving you some tools like the relative strength index, which is essentially a momentum oscillator, that can give us a sense of these so-called momentum divergences. And really what this is saying is that the momentum of change of the price has been going down over this big move, even though the price has been making higher highs. So this is not something that can be traded in isolation. There's nothing to say that this price couldn't find support here and launch higher and form this as a new base. But to me, it's something that could be an early warning sign of the start of a declining phase. The price against Bitcoin has sort of held this support line, and now it's sort of just punched through it in a sideways fashion. So, to me, I look at this chart and I have to start thinking of downside risk. And same thing when we go to the U.S. dollar chart. We see sort of this same look of a decline in momentum with an increase in the price, and a similar sort of look for the trend line. Is this sort of threatening to start a new declining phase. And if we go sort of to the, there we go. If we go to the sort of shorter term time frame, we can kind of see here that, could we be forming some kind of head and shoulders reversal pattern, for the short term? I think we could be, and so Luna has had an incredible run. I was in it. I got out. I'm basically holding no Luna at this point. But if we sort of take a measured move, it's something we can talk about in the future. But if we sort of take a measured move from this possible head and shoulders pattern, and say it continues to break down, which it won't necessarily, right? A head and shoulders could fail. It could flush down and then spring up back above the neckline and then surge higher, right? So that's something we have to keep in mind, that if the pattern fails, we have to be ready to change on a moment's notice. But probabilistically, with the momentum, the decline in momentum over quite a long period, I could see this, heading down to the 40s. And does it make sense? Then we look for like sort of ancillary things to support our, it's sort of, you do a math problem and then you check your work, right? So does it make sense, right? Are there other indicators that sort of support, and at least give you an idea that your analysis, you might be onto something, right? And so in terms of a Fibonacci retracement, the sort of golden ratio fib level, we're getting around 45 or 46, so that's just a bit under the measured move target, and so that's definitely an area, it's right up coinciding with that 50-week moving average as well, and so I think that this area is an area to watch. Assuming this doesn't fail, personally, I would start getting very interested in this. Again, this is not financial advice. I'm not a financial advisor, and you need to do your own research into your own portfolios in terms of what to do. But I'm not saying to buy or sell anything. But for me, this piques my interest here, right? So let's take a look at another chart. Yeah, just ignore that. I meant to put the head and shoulder under Luna. Polkadot is a coin that there's a loyal fan base, and when I look at this chart against the U.S. dollar, right, it's basically been doing what Bitcoin's been doing in the short term. So the point that I'm trying to make with this Polkadot example is that I have nothing against Polkadot, from a personal standpoint or whatever, right? If someone is telling me to buy Polkadot, right, I want to know, well, why should I, right? I mean, why not just buy and hold Bitcoin, right? If you're in crypto because you think that Bitcoin still has asymmetric upside over the long term, right? I'm talking 5-10 years as long term. Why would you just hold Bitcoin, right? Rather than be exposed to the risk of an altcoin, which may or may not make it. And so, just another example, right? So this is, if you look at Polkadot versus Ethereum, which I consider to be sort of the gold standard in terms of an applications layer coin or asset or blockchain, as sort of the one to beat, if you're trying to provide utility other than send and receive of value, which is what Bitcoin really is, then I want to look at it against Bitcoin. I want to look at it against Ethereum in terms of, well, if I'm going to buy an altcoin, why wouldn't I just buy Ethereum, right? And in this case here, clearly, lower highs, lower lows, even a break of horizontal support, right? So again, there's nothing to say that this couldn't flush below, get everybody scared, and then come back up. But the whole thing of lower lows and lower highs, um, this this to me, I just have to look at this chart, and I know that, well, I could save a little bit of time on looking at the parachains and what's going on with, the on Kusama and Dot in terms of their getting the blockchains connected and having their own stable coin and bridging with other protocols, right? Like, I'm still interested in that, but in terms of, am I going to use my hard-earned capital to buy this instead of Ethereum? Well, to me, the answer here is no, right? So I don't want to offend any of the Polkadot bulls. This is just sort of as an academic example, but just in a lesson that I've learned, um, and how I think TA can be really, really helpful beyond just price targets and price patterns. So hopefully that was helpful. So that's what relative weakness looks like. So just some closing thoughts. I don't want this to be just a technical analysis channel. I want this to be sort of an all-encompassing investment journey channel, and we use whatever tools that we find helpful to formulate our own thesis, right? The days of Warren Buffett, Warren Buffett, don't get me wrong, he's a great investor, right? But I mean, the days of sort of set it and forget it, passive investing into an index fund, and then retire at 67 as a millionaire, and live happily ever after, they're over, right? Those days are over. And so whether you like it or not, you need to be sourcing information constantly. You need to be using that information and synthesizing it into a thesis. And based on your thesis, you have to do something, right? You can't just sit on cash, although now actually it's probably good to have some cash, right? And based on what you execute, you get feedback, right? One way or another, you're going to get feedback, whether you're quote unquote right or wrong, right? And that sort of in terms of your returns. So this is, a loop that, continuously information, formulate thesis, execute feedback, and then you start over. This is sort of what I hope to do in my life and share with you on the channel. So the herd is usually wrong. I mean, basically what's the herd? Well, that's basically everybody on crypto Twitter. It's what most people are doing in terms of the price being reflected on charts. It's just most people you talk to out there, whether it's on Telegram, whether it's on YouTube, whether it's people in real life. I would say probably at least 80%, if not more, are part of the herd. So just keep that in mind, as you go about your, metaverse, digital lives and your real lives, and you talk to people. How do you think about crypto? I think a lot of people have gotten really rich, sort of, whether it's marketing courses to people as a way to get really rich, relatively quickly, right? Invest in speculative altcoins, which have potential to outperform Bitcoin, although they don't realize that it has the potential to outperform to the downside, right? Do you think it's a way to get rich quick, or do you see it for what I think it is, which is it's a base layer, a base technology layer to eventually underpin all asset classes, right? So Bitcoin, let's say, currently being the financial life raft in the changing world order of the dollar, of transitioning away from the petrodollar as the world's reserve currency, to more of, let's say, more of the Eastern Hemisphere countries taking on more of that commodity currency, reserve currency role, taking more of a market share from the United States dollar in that, and and the United States dollar demand being increasingly more a function of demand created by the digital economy, right? So tokenization of everything, it's something that I think we're going to see. Um, first step being to tokenize money, then to tokenize physical real assets, real estate, um, luxury goods, right? Art. We're seeing that nascently, in its infancy in the NFT market as JPEGs and things, but um, eventually everything will be tokenized. So, how do you think about crypto? Do you have that long-term vision? In which case, we're probably pretty early to get in, and in which case you can't really expect to get rich quick, and you also have to be prepared to handle this extreme volatility, um, right? But not at the expense of not being able to handle your everyday real life expenses, right? So if you see what Bitcoin and Ethereum are as digital reserve assets, Bitcoin being sort of the ascending, receiving, and storage of value, and Ethereum increasingly being serving that role with some of the merge and upgrades and the sort of a deflationary tokenomics of ETH, but also being sort of that first mover advantage of the applications layer, decentralized finance, and sort of being the asset that everyone else is sort of trying to copy with their layer ones. We can get into more specific layer ones, in subsequent videos. But if you see Bitcoin and ETH as those digital reserve assets, then I think it becomes easier to have a longer term time frame and to be patient. Now, of course, it depends on how your age, right? And I think a good number of people who have been in crypto, I've been in basically since 2020. So I for the sort of compared to the crypto OGs, I'm probably a late person, but to most people out there, still very early. So liquidity conditions are cyclical right now. The Fed has been basically telegraphing what they've been wanting to do. They're sort of, taking their foot off the gas. They had their window of opportunity with the Black Swan event of starting March 2020, to do their fiscal, quantitative easing and debt monetization. They had their window of opportunity to do that, and it's at least for the short term, intermediate term, it's sort of the window of opportunity sort of closed, right? So, whether or not they actually care about inflation in terms of its effects on sort of, let's say, the 99% out there, right? Whether they actually care about that or not, their window of opportunity to ease and to monetize debt has sort of closed for the short term, and so we're just going to have to weather that storm, right? We can talk more about that in terms of how best to do that, or how I've felt is the best way to do that for me. But it's cyclical, right? So I have a long-term time horizon on this space. I haven't sold any BTC or ETH. I got into a bunch of altcoins and then got out, um, sort of realizing that I learned a lot, and that Bitcoin and ETH are sort of those blue chip assets. And there will come a time to go farther down the risk curve, right? I just don't know exactly when that is going to be, and I will be looking at the charts to help me decide, when and in how much to go down the risk curve. So, thank you. Thank you for stopping by. Please leave any feedback in the comments. And let me know what you want to see next. This is hopefully an educational experience for both of us. So thank you, and take care.